Welcome to today's webinar, How to Turn Bounces into Sales. Today, two conversion experts combine their knowledge to bring you an end-to-end view of the conversion process you can use to dramatically lift your conversion rate. Join in the conversation on Twitter during the presentation with the hashtag #ecommerce. A few housekeeping items before we get started. There's no need to take notes. This presentation deck will be available to you after the webinar. Stick around to the end of the webinar to get details of a free offer, a custom end-to-end conversion analysis. Questions and comments can be asked in real time by using the questions pane, and there will be a QA session at the end. We have a free Desk Tidy shopping cart for the best questions day. After the webinar, copies of slides will be available by emailing offer@widerfunnel.com. Your presenters today are Chris Goward, CEO of WiderFunnel, and Charles Nicholls, CSO of SeeWhy. Charles is a marketing strategist and entrepreneur since he began his first web design business in 1994. He developed WiderFunnel's methodologies, including the Lift model and Kaizen, and is in demand globally as a speaker. He is author of the book You Should Test That, published by Wiley Sybex.
Great, thanks, Nancy. And yeah, you can get a free chapter of that the book. Actually, just launched this week at youshouldtestthat.com, and there's a free PDF download there. So I got one slide to introduce WiderFunnel. Some of you we may not have met before. So to give you some context for the perspective we're taking today, WiderFunnel is a conversion optimization agency, and that's all we do is conversion rate optimization. And I always get this question at the end, so I just want to clarify at the beginning that when we do these conversion optimization tests, we do everything from developing a conversion strategy for all of the customer touch points to doing wireframing, graphic design, copywriting, full service testing of all of the important areas on the website. Landing page optimization is a part of that as well. And we specialize in advanced testing for complex businesses and high traffic companies. All of our clients so far have had conversion rate lift of between 10 to 750% for every multi-test and retainer client, and worked on all kinds of industries. So from B2B, B2C, lead gen, e-commerce, affiliates, you name it, we've figured out processes and frameworks to increase their conversion rates. And I'll talk about that a little bit today. But I'm also very excited to be presenting with Charles. And you know, I've seen Charles present many times at conferences and webinars, and actually we bumped into each other in the fall, and at one of the conferences, and I said, you know, we should get back and do a webinar together. So Charles is a prolific writer, speaker. He's written for Mashable, Forbes, and Practical E-commerce, among others, and an expert in e-commerce. And so really happy to be working with him today.
Well, thanks very much. And Chris, just before I talk just a little bit about what we do, I'm just going to give a totally gratuitous plug for Chris's book, because it is an excellent read. It's not like a lot of business books where there's kind of one good idea and it's packed full of waffle. This is packed full of really useful stuff that you can actually use. So I strongly recommend Chris's book, and go and check out that free chapter.
Oh, thanks.
Not at all. So you'll see. Thank you very much, Chris. There you go. About SeeWhy, just in case you don't know who we are, we're a company that is headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. Although, as you may gather, I have a slightly strange accent, and that's because I hail from England. But what we do is we help major brands recover abandoned shopping carts. We're the leading service that does that. We do that for about 2,500 e-commerce sites across the globe. I think annually we are recovering about $500 million in incremental revenues for those brands. So it's quite a sizable thing. And one of the other things that we do is that we also spend a fair amount of time crunching numbers and really trying to understand what that causes people to buy and causes people to not buy. And we do that under the Conversion Academy brand, and then we run a series of educational style webinars. So this sort of falls a little bit under that. I'm going to be sharing some data with you today, which comes from that research, but that allows us to analyze a huge amount of data and really try and understand the motivations and buying behavior. So enough from me. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Charles. It's excellent. And yeah, what we've got today, I think, is a good overview of the entire funnel. I'm going to be talking about the website end of the funnel, where people are actually engaged in value proposition, and then Charles is going to come back in and talk about how to recover them when they bounce, right? So when the website hasn't performed and given them what they need, how to get them back with remarketing. So I'll start off by giving a little bit of context to what's happening in conversion optimization and where we see challenges. And I'm going to give you some examples of how to optimize the full site and a framework to do that as well. But first of all, what's interesting is we're seeing year over year that conversion rate dissatisfaction among website owners is growing. People are realizing that their conversion rate needs to improve. It's not okay, it's not enough just to have a best practices, so to speak, website put up there and do your SEO, but they need to improve their conversion rate. And that's why you're here as well. You feel the same thing, I'm sure. But also, at the same time, conversion optimization is getting harder. Conversion rate improvement is getting harder. Year over year, 5% more are saying that their conversion rate has not improved in the past year. So this is a challenging problem, right? They were realizing that conversion rate needs to improve, and yet it's getting harder to do. But the good news is conversion optimization does work if you do it right. And the problem is that a lot of people are doing it wrong. So we can only speak from our experience, but what we're seeing at WiderFunnel is average conversion rate lifts of 23% for e-commerce and 49% for lead gen for engaging in a conversion optimization and testing strategy. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to start by giving just some context and overview of what I mean by the funnel. A lot of people are focused on landing pages and thinking that conversion optimization is all about landing page optimization, but that's really just a tiny section, a tiny sliver of the potential for conversion optimization. So today we're going to talk about how to optimize throughout the entire funnel. And I look at it as the persuasional, informational, and transactional phases that your prospective buyer goes through when they're evaluating your value proposition. They go from landing pages to interior pages to get information to conversion pages. And then Charles is going to talk about what happens when they don't even make it through to becoming a customer as well, and how to get them back into the website. Okay, so starting off with landing pages. I'm going to give you an example of how landing page optimization can work. This is a company Wine Enthusiast has a group of companies, and this was a test we did with wineexpress.com. They have millions of email subscribers that they send out every day with their Wine of the Day offer. The landing page had been optimized, but they hit a plateau in the improvement they could make. They needed to get more e-commerce revenue from this, and this was actually the most important landing page in their website, the most important page in their website. So here are two variations that we tested. Now, what we had done, I'm going to show you the process partially that we went through to do this in a moment, but first of all, I want to show you some learning here on this particular test. Now, this was an isolation between two different call to action areas. We had variation A, which had an R price, discounted case price, in stock, and the add to cart button. Variation B had a larger on sale now, sale price with a larger price, and in stock, and a larger add to cart button. So we tested this with all visitors coming to this landing page, and this was tested as a template. So every day it was each of the new wine pages was updated to match the test variations. So the question we always want to ask is which one won, and you can test your conversion skills now. We're going to actually open up a poll. So you can vote on which one you think had the highest sales. Was it variation A with the R price, discounted price, and add to cart, or variation B with a larger on sale now and larger price and the large add to cart button? So go ahead and put your vote in there. See the votes coming in. And so let's take a look at what you voted for. Let's take a look at the results here. Wow, that is a decisive victory for variation B. Look at that. Well, let's take a look at what actually happened. it's clear that a lot of you have read the marketing and conversion blogs out there, and you know that variation B follows best practices, right? Well, it turns out that variation A actually won. So don't necessarily believe what you hear all the time. Now, that was a 5% conversion rate lift, and a lot of people might be saying, well, 5%, I mean, what's that? That's, that's negligible, right? But a 5% conversion rate lift in this case actually turned out to be a 41% lift in revenue per visitor. What was happening was more people with this variation were buying cases, and the average revenue per visitor was much higher than the control. So now we have another variation where this is an isolation of an urgency section. Variation A, we have a countdown timer. It says order in the next however many hours, minutes, and seconds to get 99-cent shipping, which is the special offer for the wine of the day. Variation B does not have that section. So which one won? Variation A with the high urgency countdown, or variation B with no countdown, just a blank spot in the header. So urgency countdown or none. Go ahead and vote. Follow your gut, test your conversion skills, and let's take a look at the result. Survey says, oh, variation A is in the lead. Look at that, 61% of the vote. So imagine yourself, of course, you're sitting in your boardroom and your design agency comes and presents their new concepts for your landing page, and they say, we've got a great tactic we're going to put on this landing page. It's guaranteed. A countdown timer, and it'll create urgency, and so you might use the HIPPO method that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, right? The highest paid person's opinion points at the one that they like best, and that's the one that goes live. A lot of other people will use the black turtleneck method, where the person in the room that's wearing sunglasses and the black turtleneck, they'll point at the one they like, and of course, being direct marketers, they will point at variation A. But it turns out, in this case, that variation B actually won. So, and of course, the punchline is you should test that, right? That's why we test. But we're also learning something deeper here. It's not just about tactics. There's a marketing insight. And for this particular audience, what we found through a series of many tests is that this is a highly sophisticated audience, which we knew. But they're averse to marketing tactics that feel pushy. They're sophisticated. And this is actually a dramatically redesigned page from the original control. So we did a bunch of layout testing and iFlow testing as well. And what we found is the more that we emphasized this video of the sommelier tasting notes and tied it to the add to cart, the more their sales and specifically their case sales increased. So we've got an insight about the customer here in addition to dramatic revenue lift. And that's really what we're talking about here is strategic conversion optimization, how you can test throughout your funnel to get that. All right, so let's take another example. Product detail. This is for baby age, where they had very strong awareness with their target audience, disappointed with their conversion rate. They actually were complaining to Google that they weren't getting a good ROI from their AdWords, and Google said, well, you guys need to talk to WiderFunnel, improve your conversion rate. So we need to get more e-commerce revenue. What we did is ran through the process that we always do, and I'm going to show you one of the frameworks that we use to analyze the page. And some of you may have seen the lift model before, others won't have. So I'm going to run through quickly how this works, and then I'll show you how we applied that to this particular situation. The lift model shows the 6 conversion factors that influence your conversion rate. And this is a high-level view of it. The first factor is the value proposition. And there are a lot of different definitions for value proposition. I like to think of it simply as an equation that goes on in the visitor's mind between the perceived benefits of taking action and the perceived costs of that action. And if that equation is positive, then they'll have motivation to take action. And then the other factors all surround the value proposition. So we look at the relevance of the presentation, the relevance of the value proposition to their needs, and to the source media specifically. So you can identify a little bit about their needs by looking at What are the keywords they use to come into the page? What's the source ad, right? What have they responded to? What value propositions have triggered them to come? And then by experience on that page, you can increase your conversion rate. So we can test with relevance. We can also test with clarity. And clarity includes several different factors. The clarity of the eye flow is important. The imagery clarity and the actual clarity of the call to action is important. Then there are factors that reduce conversion rates. The anxiety. Is anything on your page or missing from your page that creates uncertainty in the prospect's mind about taking that action on that particular page? And then distraction or lack of focus. Is anything that redirects attention from the primary message? And urgency is, why should I buy now? I'm going to talk about some more examples of all of these factors throughout the next few moments. And but there's a lot more information you can get about that as well online. If you Google WiderFunnel Lift, there's a whole bunch of blog posts and case studies and whatnot to find out more about that. But in the case of baby age, this is what we did. They brought us, so we took a look at their website and identified, first of all, by getting into their analytics and doing a heuristic analysis of the website, prioritized that the product page, the template throughout their site, was the most important to focus on first. This had the biggest opportunity for improvement. And then on this particular page, we did a lift analysis. And this is how it works and how you can apply it to your website as well. You may see some of these issues on your site. So first of all, there's a value proposition factor that free shipping might be more compelling than $9.99 shipping, and we know the irrational power of free as can be used to your advantage. Some distraction. There was a show all categories button that actually opened up a new page and took people off of the product page that they were looking at. There's scrolling products along the top that were taking the most prominent position. So cross-selling was actually distracting from the particular page they were looking at. There's a clarity factor that design of the pricing didn't imply the sales price, so people weren't picking up the cues that this was actually a discount price. Blue text is confused with links. There's some distraction of the shipping link opening up a new tab, more distraction, clarity factors. So there were quite a few factors, and this is just a few of the things that we identified. There was a long list of them. But when you put yourself in the shoes of your prospects and thinking through problems, and make sure that you're thinking holistically about all the opportunities for improvement. So then the next step in the process is to take those problems or weaknesses on the page and convert them into strengths. So for example, if one of the factors was that the scrolling products along the top or take the most prominent position on the page and distract, a strength is moving the product recommendations below the fold will increase sales. And that becomes a hypothesis that you can then test. And then we go through the whole list of all of those identified problems, convert them into hypotheses, and then we can test them. And now this is where the art of a strategist comes in, really, is to understand which ones do we isolate, because you can't test everything. Which ones do we isolate to gain marketing insights, and which ones do we cluster together to do sort of a swing for the fences variation. So I'm going to show you one of the isolations that we ran for baby age. This was actually one, and so this page had already been, we'd done a bunch of testing, redesigned, and of course you'll see that this eye flow is actually quite a bit different than the original one we looked at. But this was an isolation where we were showing, basically taking the left and right columns and swapping them. Variation A had the product image on the left and the price on the right. Variation B had them swapped. So the question is, which one won? Let's open up another poll. And you think variation A with the product image on the left and price on the right won, or variation B with the price on the left and product image on the right? Which one won? Oh, we see some jockeying for position in the votes here. That's interesting. All right, so let's give you one more second and go ahead and take a look at the results. Variation A is the favorite, 56% lift. And I have to thank you guys for cooperating so well with the poll polls today because it turns out that variation B won here. So that was a 16% lift in sales. And keep in mind that this is site-wide. All of the product pages overall on aggregate showed a 16% lift for all visitors to the website. So, and then of course the next question is, great, that won, why? Why was that happening? So we can then build on those hypotheses to test further and really refine our understanding of the audience. And what we believe was happening here is that this audience, as opposed to the Wine Express audience, is a price-sensitive audience. And a lot of Baby Ages items are on sale, they're discounted. And what this did was it created an iFlow that went straight from the logo right and emphasized the sale prices, the most prominent thing on the page in the product context. So that's another insight into that audience, and it's a very different audience than for Wine Express. Okay, so let's take a quick look at category pages. We have an example of spinlife.com. This was an industry-leading website for personal mover machines, wheelchairs and scooters and those types of things. And their conversion rate needed to be improved. They needed more e-commerce sales. So here's an example of a category page. So when people click on one of the categories, so mobility scooters in this case, they come to this page where we have a tile view or a list view. This is a common test that will sometimes run in certain situations. So we'll open up a poll and you can guess which one won. Was it a tile view showing 4 along the top, 3 in a second row of tiles, or a list all of the page? Which one do you think won? Tile is A, list is B. Okay, let's take a look at the votes. And we have another winner for A, 55% votes for A. And what actually happened? Variation B won. So why did that happen? Well, in this case, actually, many times we see list views actually performing better than tile views in a lot of contexts, especially when there's more information needed about the products. And this actually allows them to scan through and compare prices very easily, whereas the tile view perhaps isn't as scannable, and the iFlow here is improved. So that's a tip you can go and try and test on your website too. All right, so here's another situation that is very common for e-commerce websites, the persistent calls to action. And we've done a lot of tests with these actually for e-commerce and lead gen, where there's offers that follow visitors throughout their website experience. Now, we call them PCTAs. Now, so just to be clear what I'm talking about, this is an example with JCPenney where they have a hover and it drops down and shows you the items that you have in your cart. This is an example of a PCTA, persistent call to action area, so that you want them to respond to. Now, there's a common belief, and this is where I want to get into anxiety a little bit. There's a common belief that adding more security badges and emphasizing your security badges will increase your sales. There's a lot of so-called conversion gurus that will tell you if you're paying for these things, you should put them as prominently on your website as possible. Put them in the header, put them by your calls to action, and put them everywhere. So which one of these two do you think would win, right? You've got the checkout, persistent call to action, versus one with the McAfee Secure. And it turns out we actually tested this and found that an overemphasis on security actually creates anxiety. And in this case, it actually reduced sales. Common accepted best practices. And when you think about it, if you're shopping on a website and you see a whole bunch of security badges, you have to ask yourself, does this actually create trust? Does this make you feel more secure, or does it create anxiety? I like to think about offline retailers as well. You know, they've been perfecting the shopping experience for hundreds of years. And when you think about this experience that you're looking at right now, I mean, you can almost smell the leather coming off of these comfortable couches, the plush carpets, the warm, soft lighting. I mean, it just makes you want to go and buy things, right? It makes you want to open your wallet. What would you rather shop in? This comfortable experience or a high security environment you want to open? happens online, when you create by answering questions that the visitors aren't asking, making them think about the wrong things. The last example I'm going to give you here is for home pages. And home pages can be some of the most contentious parts of websites because there are a lot of players. Everyone wants home page. Wants to have their favorite designs on there. And what we're often seeing are examples here like Forever 21, where you've got a prominent offer. So the visitor arrives on the page and when you think about their experience, first of all, they have to orient themselves to where they are on the page. They sit, they load up the page, and they say, okay, Forever 21, I see there's a navigation at the top. I see there's an offer. I see there's a starting at $17.80. Oh, what's that about? There's leather. Oh, leather. Oh, that's kind of cute. Maybe I can check that out. I wonder. And just as she's about to click on that offer, it switches. And now there's a new offer, right? This is called a rotating banner, rotating offer, and it's so common on websites. Now she has to reorient herself to a new layout, a new offer, and a new product. And so she may think, well, this is interesting. Maybe this is something I'm interested in as well, or maybe I want to try and get back to the other one. And just as she's about to make a click, it changes again. How many times have you experienced this? Well, it turns out that we've tested this many times and found in almost every case that rotating messages are a distraction and tend to lose in conversion rate tests. So don't just, like a lemming, follow the typical approaches that a lot of websites are built with. You should test that and find out if it actually works. So I hope those have been helpful for you to get some good ideas for testing on your website, and as well as a framework to think about the visitor's perspective. And there are a lot more frameworks that can be helpful as well that we can walk you through. But I also want to pass it over to Charles here to talk about how to recover those experiences once they've abandoned your site, how to get them back with remarketing.
Well, of course, they don't all buy. I mean, that's the sad reality. So it's worth looking at this as the other side of the coin. Two sides. There's the how can we get them to buy when they're on the site, and what happens when they don't, and can we do anything about that? So let's just have first of all, a quick look at what actually happens. Analysis of huge amounts of e-commerce data basically leads you to this kind of set of conclusions, which is that it's not really about a single visit. Whilst your web analytics might be showing you all visitors to a particular page and they all look alike, they are of course different. The chance of getting a first-time brand new visitor to convert are about 0.25%, a quarter of 1% on average. If you can get them to return, then they're 9 times more likely to purchase. If you can get them to get all the way into the cart, add something to the cart and identify themselves, then 72 times more likely to purchase. And if they do that multiple times, then in fact, serial abandoner, as we refer to it, is not a really bad person. You think they would be, because you tend to think that conversion is good and abandonment is bad, right? But in fact, somebody who is a serial abandoner is showing a significant amount of intent to you. And if you do it well, then you can get back half of those at that point will then purchase. So it's well worth thinking about the journey that the customer needs to go on to get to the point where they will make the conversion and what it takes to actually get that. And there's various studies, but on average you could say in e-commerce that's 5 touches across 1.5 different channels before you're going to get that conversion. So it's worth looking at just very quickly why people don't buy in an e-commerce environment, and you can really boil that down into 2 causes. I mean, there's a great big long list of things here. It's as long as your arm. But if you look at the top ones, the top 5, then they're really price objections or they're timing objections. I'm not yet ready to buy, and I'm concerned about price. I want to look around. I need some more research. So these are things which are difficult to deal with purely on the site on its own, because this journey is going to span multiple visits. And therefore, not everybody is going to convert on every visit, and that's recognizing that is half the battle. So it's worth also then thinking about, well, why do they buy rather than why don't they buy? Why do they buy? And this is a great study, if you haven't seen it, from PwC called The Experience. It really looked at a wallet kind of question. In fact, I think this study started out as looking at the effectiveness of loyalty programs, and they found, as you see in this, this chart, in fact, loyalty programs are the least effective in terms of getting people to buy from you. And as you'd expect, price is really important. But after that, you're really talking about past experience and those moments of truth that make a difference. You know, when the item breaks and you know, the brand is then immediately willing to help you, then that can create a lasting relationship which will overcome all sorts of objections. So understanding that it's not just price and it's not just timing, but it's also brand trust. And the trust is a mixture of the brand image and of past experience. So those things are all very important. That's obviously why the first-time visitor is far less likely to buy, because they don't have that past experience necessarily. So let's jump into some examples of what you can do about it. So this is an example here for Guthy-Renker Proactives. This is the #1 anti-acne cream in the US, and they run a 3-step remarketing campaign when people abandon shopping carts. And the goal there, this is a direct TV example, the goal there is to try and offer 2 different price alternatives, so that handles the pricing objection, and to nudge them a sequence of times gently to get the timing objection over. So prime timing in that way, which should reassure them, particularly in the middle one, about the trust elements and how the product really works well. So that kind of shows you how you should begin to think about the core unique to your site before you begin to think about the strategy of getting people back. And as we've seen, if you can get them back, then the economics can be unbelievably favorable. So when we're talking about economics, and if you look at personalization in particular, then the whole remarketing and retargeted advertising are generally, very, very high ROI, probably the highest ROI in e-commerce, simply because small changes here make a dramatic difference. And you can see very large numbers of people coming back, because basically what you're doing is you're taking your best prospects, the customers who almost bought, who aren't yet ready to buy, and you're nudging them gently to try and throw them back into the funnel. And you're probably throwing them back not at the top of the funnel, but back into the top of the cart or the top of the checkout process, maybe with an incentive, maybe without, in order to try and get them to come back and buy. So it's very effective. So this is the process really of how it works, and this is what you should be thinking about. So visitors come along, they add items to the cart, or if it's a form-based approach, then they get partway through the process of completing the form, and then they don't convert in one form or another. And on average, that's 72% in shopping carts and about 67% in online forms. But it's a large number. Don't go all the way through the process for the reasons that we've outlined. Now, if you're tracking them, then what you can do is you can then trigger an automated response. And the automated response can then basically trigger an entire unique campaign for them. And that can either be email or ad, typically. I mean, it can be SMS too, and they can be phone-based too, but those are 2 most common. And obviously, you're going to use ads where you haven't captured an email address, and then you're going to use emails where you have, and maybe in some cases you will want to do both and have a blended kind of campaign. And that's sort of a level of optimization that we quite often get into talking about with customers. And then hopefully, people will click through and then they'll come back and buy. Come back and buy. And that is a really, really big number. You do the math on your site, it doesn't take very long. It's back of an envelope job. If you've got a 72% abandonment rate, but you can get back 1 in 4 of those that you can go hit, then that translates often into millions of dollars. So the first thing to think about when you're thinking about this kind of approach is you need to understand that there is what we call an organic return rate. So you don't do anything, some people will come back under their own steam and buy. And on average, looking at this across millions of transactions, it's about 8%. Obviously, mileage will vary. You need to test that. You need to measure that yourself. But it's about 8%. And if you look at what happens and when they come back, then what you find is that really the most interesting period is in the first day and a bit, something like that. There's a little bump at 7 days, and then a little bump at 14 days. And that's really because people are creatures of habit. You know, if they're shopping on Sunday night at 7 p.m., then they might well think that 7 p.m. on Sunday night, oh yeah, Sunday night, I meant to do that, you know, I meant to do that last week, I'll get round to it. And people are creatures of habit in that way. So when you think about remarketing, first thing you've got to think about is timing. Timing is really important. If you wait 24 hours, then you're leaving behind a big chunk of the opportunity. And yet, the vast majority of remarketing campaigns that are out there, they wait 24 hours because it's easier to do, because you can extract a batch out of your e-commerce system and then upload it somewhere in your, say, in your emailing system, and the net result is you lose a lot of the opportunity. So if you put it in with an immediate send, then you're going to see dramatic lift, and that lift is really going to come in the first few hours. In fact, you can say, or rather we can measure, that 72% of that return is probably going to come within the first 12 hours. It's an enormous number, and that's really because what this is doing, this is connecting with it. So you're keeping the idea of the purchase alive, and therefore you're tapping into the emotion of the purchase, as opposed to simply sending a mechanical system-generated kind of a follow-up. And that emotion is really powerful. Now what this also does mean is that when you measure this, is that you need to use a control group. And there's no real substitute for doing this. We very often have this conversation about, you know, attribution models and the like, but actually when it comes to remarketing, that because it's an overlay over and above the other campaigns that you're running, then you really need to think about that control group. And obviously, you know, your organic return rate, about 8% or something of that order, you know, will come back and buy. And therefore, when you're looking at the effectiveness of these campaigns, and what you need to do is you need to take away the organic return, which is dynamic. It's constantly changing because of the promotions you're running, the prices that you're offering versus your competitors, etc., in order to calculate the true lift. So start and think about the control group as being really important, because people will come back. The second pitfall you've got to watch out for is you've got to stay in step with what the customer is doing. Now, major brands have found to their cost what happens when you get out of step. If you put a promotion into a remarketing email and you send that after 24 hours, you don't know what that 8% has been doing in between when they abandoned and maybe when you communicated with them. And by putting the promotional in there, what you end up doing is you end up sabotaging all the goodwill of that sale, because what you've just done is you just betrayed the brand by making a promotional offer to somebody who's just purchased. Now you see this most in email because it's a one-to-one communication, and they will then very often reply and or phone the call center and complain. It's happened to me, and you bet I complained. You know, and then I told lots of people about it. In fact, I wrote a blog about it because I was so annoyed by it. But if you run ads in exactly the same way, they may not complain because they just think your ads are out of sync, and they're just going to be annoyed, and you've damaged the brand without even being able to know it or without even being able to measure it. They just think you changed the price. You just pissed them off a little bit. So be very, very careful. And really what you need to do here is you need to think about tracking visitors on a real-time basis. Because once you start tracking them, then you're in step continually, and in particular you can track when people purchase, and then you can make sure that you don't sabotage all that goodwill that you've been building up. So without a real-time approach, then you should not, in my view, personalize your email. So make it, so for example, put in items of the things they had in the cart, because they may well have already purchased, in which case you're now no longer looking relevant. You shouldn't remind them multiple times, the multi-stage campaigns, because, you know, getting out of step once is sort of embarrassing. You can shoot yourself in the foot once, but doing it multiple times is like reloading so that you can shoot yourself again. You know, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And definitely don't use promotions, because that's the one that's really going to inflame people in a big way. So what this effectively means is that if you don't do this carefully, if you don't do a real-time monitoring approach, then what happens is that you can't really address, you know, the timing objections, multi-stage campaigns, and the price objections with promotional offers in these campaigns. So that is the number one big gotcha that you need to think about. So I'll lay that out there up front. Now, moving away from gotchas, so if somebody said to me, well, how would I start and what would this sort of look like, then you should think about something along these sort of lines. A sequence, immediate, maybe plus 23 hours for the second, and the third one, if you can do a third one, at 6 days and 23 hours. If you're putting a promotional offer in, you want to be holding it for the last of the sequence for all sorts of obvious reasons. We want lots of people to convert at full margin. And in reality, many brands don't put promotional offers in because you just don't need to. Again, this is keeping the idea of the sale alive, and it's about reminding, reassuring, and then if you need to, promoting to get them further down that path in terms of getting closer to the sale. Now, when it comes to creative design, this is something that we spend a lot of time on, because just like you might optimize a landing page, you certainly want to think about optimizing your emails, and this can have a huge difference. And in some ways, this has more in common with a landing page than a typical B2C type of email. It doesn't have the big banner. It hasn't got a big offer across the top. It's much more focused and laid out simply in terms of this is about the product you're just looking at. It's got some value there. It tells you about it. It's got a clear call to action and lots of, which is complete, because I might charge my credit card if I press that. Whereas view my card to work better. It's a service message, it's not an overt promotional message, and service messages generally work better. Obviously, you need to test that and figure out why that's the case, but personalizing it and delivering value in the email, really based upon what's on the product detail page, is going to work really well. So taking the review stars, taking the product details, taking the link back to the product detail page, and in particular, taking a link which is pre-populated back to the cart. One of the reasons these emails get unbelievably high open rates, sort of average 46%, is because they're connecting when they're relevant. But when they open them, they'll tend to open them multiple times. The average one of these is open 2.2 times because people are keeping them and going back to them, and then they use the link to go back to the cart because it's very easy to do that. And also you've got to remember they might well be opening them on a mobile device. If abandoned on the mobile, because abandon rates on mobiles are much, much higher, 72% across all devices, 97% on mobile devices. So you're viewing it on your mobile phone, you're not going to buy it there, therefore I'll look at it later. So that, again, the multiple open comes that way. So really what you're trying to do with this email is trying to have a visual communication to the product detail page and keep the idea of the sale alive. And you can do that in various different ways, but you can do that in ways which are very on brand, and you can gently introduce some urgency here. So this is UGG boots. I mean, UGG was one of the highest search items in holiday of last year, the holiday season last year, a really hot item. And there they've got a sort of a gentle reminder, got something in your cart, don't forget they sell out fairly quickly, and then by the time you get to the second one, it's perhaps a little bit more persistent, but it's still gentle, and it's really making the product the hero. It's using the product photography really to emphasize the brand and communicate the brand personality in a gentle way. In these campaigns, one question that quite often comes up is, well, what if I've got multiple items in my cart? Should I have them all listed out or not? Should I put prices in there? And my view is, well, obviously, you need to test that. Generally, we advise people to focus on one particular item, as per the last two examples, because it gives you much more real estate to play with. It allows you to really bring sales and get people excited about the idea of the purchase again, as opposed to thinking about the cart and maybe the value of the cart. But I would say test it, because it's different for different brands in different environments. And you see an example here of one we've powered for Adidas, which is being rolled out very widely. So in terms of other aspects of optimization, we've talked about making it personalized, and the personalized can have a dramatic impact. If you look at the recovery rate here, over doing nothing, then static content, which is basically just a sort of simple reminder, you left something in your cart, we're not quite sure what it was, but do come back because we miss you, kind of thing. So not personalized, not really delivering any value. I always think about these things as trying to be relevant, so timing is relevant, important. The relevance is part of personalization too, and the value is in that personalized link back to the cart. So if you deliver value, clear call to action, and it's relevant, then you're on a good footing. And you can see dramatic impacts in lift really from that personalization, because people then believe this is not a system-generated email, but this is something which is personal and one-to-one to them, and therefore you get that connection. Now you might say, well, is it worth doing real-time versus batch? We talked about how you've seen the charts, you understand why that's more effective. If you do a real-time campaign versus a batch campaign and you run an A/B test, you will probably double your revenue by doing it in real time. If you then run real-time with multi-stage, which you shouldn't do unless you've got real-time tracking, you shouldn't be doing multi-stage campaigns, then you're probably going to see some incremental lift from the step 2 and step 3, not as much as from the first undoubtedly is being the most important, but you're still probably going to see about 3x lift improvement over an A/B test. And we've done multiple tests in that vein. But obviously test it. Now, one other question you're going to have undoubtedly is, well, where does the email address come from if you're doing email? Obviously, ads is easy. I drop a pixel and away we go. But email is more complicated. Email is obviously also different because it's much more real estate and it's much more direct and one-to-one, and therefore the ROI is truly off the charts. So you can get the email address from multiple places. Obviously, if they're a returning visitor, they're clicking through from an email. That's an obvious one, or from a cookie. If they log in, either using a registration page or subscribe or social login button. But the other one, which is kind of very obvious, is where are you capturing the email address in the checkout process? And in general, the advice is you should move it up. If it's underneath your credit card number, then that's not going to work very effectively. But if you move it up, then you will be able to capture significantly more email addresses, and then on that basis, you'll have more people in your program, and therefore you will make more money. And it's as simple as that in the way that it works. I mean, obviously, where it is in the process is important too from your conversion optimization on site. So maybe that's something that if people want us to explore, Chris and I collectively, we can talk about more in the Q&A. Which is what happens when somebody abandons and no email address has been captured. Well, under those circumstances, you can use a slider. And a slider is basically an overlay which on exit can then prompt them. So here from the, from a category page, and you can see that have dramatic impacts. In this particular case for a subscription, so subscribe, you can see a doubling effectively of your subscription rate when doing that. And you can think about sliders working not just on the category pages, but all the way through down to the product detail page, down to the shopping cart itself, and maybe even deep in the checkout. At that point you might think about making an offer, those sorts of things. So all of those things are valid and there. I'll put them in there so that when you get a copy of the slides, you've got them there for reference. So just a very quick checklist before we move over to the Q&A of shopping carts and really what it takes to get traffic back. If you can get traffic back, it's very, very high quality traffic. This will probably have more impact on your conversion rate than anything else you can do in terms of traffic sourcing, simply because you're recycling people who almost bought, but maybe aren't quite yet ready to buy. Kind of very obvious that this is going to work well. So the starting point should be certainly a sequence of gentle nudges, not too aggressive. You don't want to be chasing them down the aisles, or chasing them down the street saying, hey, you left your shopping cart, So gentler tends to work better. Service-based, delivering value is good. Real-time send is important, but equally staying in step, so real-time tracking is critical too. Service tone is going to work better, it's sort of gentler. Link back to the completed cart or part completed form, really important part of value. If you don't have a persistent cart or persistent form, it can very often be reconstructed as part of a link, but that's worth the effort in doing, because obviously that delivers value for the customer from the customer's point of view. If you get part way through, imagine a sort of a 3-page financial services form, and then all of a sudden you get a link which takes you back to where you finished off, or where you left off, then that's beautiful. That delivers me great value, and I love that. Okay, alternative methods of contact, phone, email, those sorts of things. They help communicate this is a service and you care about their business. Links to more information. So it's not just about getting them to press a buy now button. Deliver value. So links to reviews. Those things can have a dramatic impact on the end conversion result. And then reassurance and brand trust. And if you're going to put an incentive in, only if, then think about it very carefully in how it's structured, and definitely keep it to the last of the sequence, because otherwise you can cannibalize your AOV very easily. Okay, so let's move on to the Q&A. Now, both companies here have come together to pull together a free offer, which is an end-to-end conversion analysis, which is going to look both at the on-site part and the off-site part, how you can get them back. And we'll work with you collectively to help you understand, what that potential is, so that you can see in yourself, for your own, if you took this end-to-end approach, how that could be applied in your business. Now, there are only 10 available. I tell you this now. There are lots of people on this webcast today, so only 10. First come, first served. You need to do this, to qualify, you need to email offer@widerfunnel.com. That's pretty easy to remember. Tell us the URL and tell us the traffic volume. In order to qualify, you need a minimum of 30,000 unique visitors per month. A few other conditions apply, but send us an email and be one of the first 10, and we will come back to you and let you know whether you are there and whether you qualify. So at that point, let me throw it back over to Chris.
Great, thanks, Charles. And we have a few questions here that have come in. So we've got a couple minutes here to answer some questions. I want to be conscious of time so that we don't keep people too long. But let's take a look. We've got a question here for Charles. If there are multiple items in the cart, has your testing shown which to feature, either the first or the last or the random item, or what's the best way to present those cart items?
Okay. So, of course, you're going to know the answer already, don't you? You've got to test this. That's going to be a common theme. The answer we typically recommend is to start. I mean, our starting point is get a campaign up and running quickly with a 3-stage campaign using some default timings, and get a baseline. And from that, you've then got something which can then be tested. Once you've got some data, then you'll know where you are. So your starting point, I think, should probably be the first item out of the cart for a simple reason, which is if you think about all the traffic that's navigating around the site, huge numbers of people never, ever add anything to the cart. So that is a micro-conversion in its own right, pressing that button. And the first item they add to the cart is probably the one that they got most interested in. That was the one that caused that micro-conversion, therefore that's probably the one to hook onto. But it could be the most expensive. Or you could choose to show, the most expensive 3 or the first 3 added or something of that order. But I would start probably with one, the first, nice big images of it, and don't necessarily show multiples in the cart. You might test that at a later stage.
Right. Good points, and it may, as you say, testing may reveal some differences in how a particular product group will work versus others. There's probably no general rule to say you should always use the last or the most expensive or the or the lowest price, right? It may depend on the target audience and the type of products they have and the product breadths and those types of things as well. So another question here. What's the industry average bounce rate off a landing page from paid traffic? And that's a tricky question because depends on the industry, I guess, but not sure whether there's an average bounce rate that is actually applicable because they vary so widely. And bounce rates can go from, well, actually, conversion rate is sort of almost a corollary to the bounce rate, but they can vary so widely. We have one client that has would not be satisfied with anything less than a 50% conversion rate because it's a lead gen for consumer for a free guide, and that's what we've gotten them up to. and now we're trying to get up to 60%. But for others, a 1% conversion rate would be fantastic. So it all depends on the traffic source and the offer. And I did a blog post a little while ago because this is a common question about averages. What's the average bounce rate? What's the average conversion rate? And if you Google your conversion rate doesn't matter, you'll probably find that post, and you probably by now understand the point of the post. But it's about the only thing that matters when looking at conversion rate as well as bounce rate is relatively. So in other words, how can they be improved? And there's no way to really tell if you're on track on average or not for on aggregate. Another question here. So I think the question for you, Charles, have you seen similar performance with one-off B2C product versus shopping cart? For instance, a membership service. So is this strategy, I think the question is, applicable to other types of categories other than shopping cart?
Absolutely. It's running very widely across everything from a bank account to online gaming to single products, which are, in fact, the Guthy-Renker example was a single product effectively sold by infomercial areas. It really comes down to understanding where your traffic is in relation to the point that they're then ready to buy. And understanding that journey, I think, is quite important. If it's going to take, probably more than one visit, and you're not going to get a huge number of people converting on the first one, then this is going to work.
Mm-hmm. Another one for you, I think here. What's the optimum time to send, or the emails? Won't a real-time email freak people out?
Well, I mean, that's actually a very good question. It could, is the answer, and it all depends upon how you do it. If you chase somebody aggressively with the wrong tone, then you can freak them out. You can harm, the conversion process. You can generate negative lift doing that, as opposed to, that's one of the reasons that we say a gentle service tone is going to work better, because what you're doing is you're recognizing that probably half the audience are not yet ready to buy, maybe more, and that's why they abandon. They put stuff in the cart so they can find it again more easily. That's why they do it. It's almost like a wish list. So recognizing that's really important, because then you begin to think through in their shoes what kind of communication they'd want to receive, and it's actually about something which helps them. We want to help you. Here are some links that might be useful. When you're ready, back to the cart so you can find your stuff again easily. You just made my job more easy. And in particular in a multi-device world, if I'm on a mobile phone, then all you've done is you've then just made it very easy to switch device and then find that stuff again very easily.
Mm-hmm. Good, and I think there's a follow-up question that just came in from Rick. Does having a wish list make a big difference? I think riffing off what you were just saying.
Well, I'll have first bash at that, and then you can have a go, Chris, if you want. I've seen a trend overall in the last few years of people really not using wish lists anywhere near as much as just sticking stuff in the cart, because they've got used to persistent cart functionality. In fact, they expect persistent cart functionality to be there. It's one of the reasons why the shopping cart abandonment rate has gone up over the last 5 years consistently year on year, is because customer behavior has got used to the way that e-commerce sites work and the fact that they're going to be able to find their stuff again later. Now that tells you actually that setting your cart persistence to 30 days, 90 days, whatever it is actually quite important. There are still some sites out there, astonishingly, that set it's 24 hours and you go back after 24 hours and you can't find your stuff again. And it really shows that you're not thinking through all the way exactly what the customer is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the only shopping cart wish list that I think is having a lot of success is Amazon, because they've been brilliant in creating that persistent, multi-site wish list function, where you can actually add items from other shopping carts into your wish list, And so a lot of people are using that as sort of their central, I know just for this last holiday season in our family, there were several people that, used the wish list function to send, hints on what they'd like for Christmas. And so that's going well. But yeah, it's there's a trade-off in your own individual site between having a focused call to action on your cart versus the wish list, and it makes the decision more complex and adds distraction as well. It's easier if you just have a cart that functions as a wish list, as Charles was saying. One more question here. Does top of the hour, but it's that's a good question, Anthony. It's very important, actually. The short answer. We've done a lot of testing with calls to action above and below the fold, and that's kind of a one where we've rarely seen an example where putting the call to action below the fold works better. There are some exceptions in cases where you need to slowly bring people along to the idea of making a purchase. So on a long copy page, landing page, in some cases it's actually better to have to introduce the call to action later, but that's a very rare case. In most cases, above the fold, giving an indication that you can buy or become a lead or whatever the call to action is, as right up front works best. So we have a few other questions, and what we'll do is follow up with them by email directly. We've run out of time here, but thank you for attending, and thanks, Charles, for working together with us to put this on, and look forward to the next one.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, Chris.